Okay, so you want to own a truck stop. You buy some land next to a highway, put up a giant sign, sell diesel, burgers, and beef jerky, and watch truck drivers pull in every few minutes. Sounds pretty simple, except a serious truck stop isn't really a gas station. It's a giant logistics business disguised as a convenience store. Pilot alone now operates more than 900 locations across the United States and Canada, serves roughly 1.2 million guests every day, and moves about 12 billion gallons of fuel a year. And here's where it gets interesting. Fuel can account for the majority of a convenience store's sales dollars while generating a much smaller share of its gross profit. In 2025, fuel represented about 65% of convenience store sales dollars, but only about 39% of gross profit dollars. So you're looking at billions of dollars of fuel moving through these businesses. But the fuel itself isn't necessarily where the money is. The real money comes from what happens after the truck pulls in. The driver fills a 150-gallon tank, then buys a $12 meal, then a $4 coffee, then takes a $15 shower, then buys a drink, then parks for the night, then maybe gets a tire repaired. The truck might only be inside your property for 30 minutes, but that 30 minutes can generate revenue from 5 or 6 different businesses. Understand that mechanic, and you understand the truck stop business. Miss it, and you can spend millions of dollars building a beautiful truck stop that looks busy from the highway while barely making money. Because the first thing you need to understand is why truck stops exist in the first place. America moves on trucks. Manufacturing plants need raw materials. Supermarkets need food. Amazon warehouses need inventory. Construction sites need equipment and materials. And all of it has to move. The truck driver is the person physically carrying that economy from one place to another. But here's the problem. A truck can't just pull over anywhere. A tractor trailer can be more than 70 feet long. It can't fit into a normal parking lot. It can't casually park on a residential street. And the driver is legally limited by hours of service rules. Eventually, that driver has to stop. And when that happens, the location of your truck's stop becomes incredibly valuable. In 2025, the American Transportation Research Institute reported that nationally there was roughly one truck parking space for every 11 truck drivers. Think about what that means. You aren't just selling diesel, you're selling access to a piece of land that a driver desperately needs at exactly the moment they need it. And that's why demand can be surprisingly durable. Even when freight volumes slow down, trucks still have to move essential goods. And when freight activity increases, the demand for fuel, parking, food, repairs, showers, and rest increases with it. But not every truck stop is the same business. You have the basic fuel and parking operation. This is the simplest version. You might have 10 to 20 acres, several diesel lanes, a convenience store, bathrooms, showers, and maybe 50 to 150 truck parking spaces. Your margins are relatively thin because fuel is competitive. You're fighting every other truck stop within driving distance on price. Then you have the full-service travel center. Now you're adding restaurants, showers, laundry, truck repair, scales, parking reservations, retail, and sometimes multiple food brands. This is where the economics become much more interesting. You're increasing the amount each customer can spend without necessarily needing another customer. Then you have the giant destination travel center. Think Buc-ee's. Although Buc-ee's is more famous for serving passenger travelers than traditional truck drivers, its massive travel center model shows how valuable the highway customer can become when you turn a fuel stop into a destination. A new Buc-ee's opening in Texas in 2026 is a roughly $47 million development spanning about 74,000 square feet, with more than 100 fueling positions and around 175 employees. That's not a gas station. That's a roadside shopping center. And then you have specialized truck facilities, repair shops, truck washes, fleet fueling, dedicated parking, cold storage and logistics services. Each one has a different margin profile. The higher margin services can be incredibly valuable, but they also require more equipment, more employees, more liability, and more management. So what is the actual business model? It's surprisingly simple. You buy or lease strategically located land. You build infrastructure. You attract trucks. You sell fuel. Then you monetize the driver's stop. That's it. And the single most important number isn't actually fuel volume. It's customer capture. How much money does each truck leave behind? Because imagine 600 trucks pass your exit every day. If only 100 stop, you have a problem. But if 300 stop, and each one spends an average of $55 across fuel, food, drinks, showers, parking, and services, you're doing $16,500 of customer spending every day. That's about $495,000 a month. And that's before you even consider higher volume days. Now imagine your average captured customer rises from $55 to $70. Same highway, same parking lot, same building, same number of trucks. You just increased daily revenue by $4,500. That's another $1.35 million a year in customer spending. This is why the inside of the store matters so much. The fuel gets the truck onto your property. The store tries to keep the driver's wallet there. And the parking lot can turn a 30-minute customer into an overnight customer. Let's say you build a truck stop with 150 overnight parking spaces. Suppose you charge $20 for premium reserve parking. If you average 80 paid spaces per night, that's $1,600 a night, about $48,000 a month. Nearly $584,000 a year, and that's just parking. Now suppose your location sells 25,000 gallons of diesel a day. At a hypothetical 30-cent per gallon gross spread, that's $7,500 of gross fuel margin per day. That's about $2.74 million a year before operating expenses. But here's the trap. You don't get to keep that $2.74 million. You have payroll, credit card fees, fuel transportation, utilities, insurance, maintenance, property taxes, waste removal, snow removal in some states, security, equipment repairs, inventory shrinkage, environmental compliance, and debt service. And this is where people get destroyed, because a truck stop can have enormous revenue and mediocre profit. That's the paradox. You can look at a location doing $20 million a year in sales and assume the owner is printing money. But if most of that revenue is fuel, the gross profit can be dramatically smaller than the headline sales number suggests. Now let's talk about getting into this business, because this is where your fantasy of buying a piece of land and putting up some pumps starts falling apart. Location is everything. You don't just want a highway, you want the right highway. You want heavy truck traffic. You want easy highway access. You want enough land. You want room for turning radiuses. You want visibility. You want utilities. You want nearby freight activity. And ideally, you want limited direct competition. A property that looks cheap because it's 15 miles from the nearest major highway might be worthless. A property directly beside a major freight corridor could be worth millions. And then there's zoning. A local government may be perfectly happy with a small gas station and completely unhappy with 150 tractor trailers idling overnight. Noise, traffic, lighting, wastewater, stormwater, environmental concerns, diesel tanks, driveway access, road improvements, fire regulations. You may need multiple permits and approvals before you sell a single gallon. And underground fuel storage is another major issue. You're dealing with environmental regulation because a leaking underground tank can turn a profitable property into a very expensive cleanup project. Then there's the land. Let's build a hypothetical independent truck stop. Say you find 15 acres along a major interstate corridor. Your land costs $2 million. Now you need site work, grading, drainage, stormwater management, road access, paving, lighting, utilities. Let's assume another $3 million. Then you build a 10,000 square foot convenience and service building. At a hypothetical all-in construction cost of $300 per square foot, you're at another $3 million. Then comes the fuel system: tanks, pumps, canopies, diesel lanes, piping, monitoring equipment. Let's put another $2.5 million into the project. Now you need truck parking. Say 150 spaces. Heavy-duty pavement isn't cheap. You're moving massive vehicles across that surface every day. Let's allocate another $1.5 million. Then equipment, refrigeration, kitchen equipment, POS systems, security cameras, scales, laundry equipment, showers, backup power, maintenance equipment. Let's say $750,000. Then professional fees, engineering, architecture, legal, permits, environmental studies, surveying, financing costs, marketing, and contingency. Another $1.25 million. Suddenly, your $2 million piece of land has turned into a project costing roughly $14.5 million. And you haven't even opened yet. That's why truck stops are capital-intensive businesses. You're not buying a storefront, you're building infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't forgive mistakes. If your highway entrance is badly designed, you can't simply move it. If your parking lot is too small, you can't magically create another 100 spaces. If your location doesn't generate enough truck traffic, repainting the bathrooms isn't going to save you. Now let's talk about the money. Suppose your independent truck stop eventually reaches $18 million in annual sales. Maybe $11 million comes from diesel and gasoline. $3 million comes from convenience store sales. $1.5 million comes from restaurants and prepared food. $750,000 comes from parking. $1.75 million comes from showers, repairs, truck services, and everything else. Sounds fantastic. $18 million. But now subtract the cost of merchandise and fuel, then payroll. Suppose you're carrying 30 to 50 employees across shifts, then utilities, insurance, maintenance, property taxes, credit card fees, waste, security, advertising, and your debt. If you finance $10 million of that project, your interest expense can become enormous, especially in a higher rate environment. And that is one of the biggest differences between a great truck stop and a terrible one. The great operator isn't obsessed with revenue, they're obsessed with return on invested capital. If you spend $15 million to make $500,000 in annual operating profit, that's a terrible investment. If you spend $15 million and eventually generate $2 million of operating profit, suddenly the economics become much more interesting. And this is where the big companies have an enormous advantage. Pilot has more than 900 locations and about 30,000 employees, while serving around 1.2 million guests every day. Love's, another giant in the industry, has continued expanding and remodeling its network, announcing 70 new or updated locations for 2025. These companies aren't just buying pumps, they're building networks. They have purchasing power. They have loyalty programs. They have fleet relationships. They have real estate expertise. They can negotiate with restaurant brands. They can spread technology and marketing costs across hundreds of locations. You can't compete with that by opening a random truck stop next to an interstate. You need a reason for drivers to choose you. Maybe your parking is easier. Maybe your showers are cleaner. Maybe your food is better. Maybe your location saves drivers 5 minutes. Maybe your fuel price is consistently competitive. Maybe you have a repair shop that gets them back on the road faster. Because to a truck driver, time is money. A driver doesn't want to spend 20 minutes fighting through a parking lot. They don't want to wait an hour for a shower. They don't want to walk across a giant property to find a bathroom. They want to stop, get what they need, and leave. That's the business opportunity. You're monetizing convenience under pressure. And there's another opportunity developing in 2026. Electric trucks. As electric heavy-duty vehicles become more common, the traditional fuel model will eventually change. The biggest travel center operators are already investing in charging infrastructure. Pilot, for example, had more than 875 EV fast charging stalls across its network by late 2025. But here's the interesting part. Electric trucks may need even more sophisticated stopping infrastructure. Charging takes longer than filling a diesel tank. That means the 30-minute stop could become a 1-hour stop. And when the customer stays longer, the opportunity to sell food, drinks, services, parking, and other products increases. The truck stop of the future may look less like a fuel station and more like a logistics hub. But don't mistake that opportunity for easy money. Your biggest risks are brutal. Fuel prices can move violently. Freight demand can slow. A competitor can open 5 miles away. A highway interchange can be redesigned. Labor costs can rise. Insurance can explode. Environmental problems can destroy your economics. Interest rates can make your debt unbearable. And one bad location decision can lock you into decades of mediocre returns. So should you own a truck stop? If you have $10 million to $20 million available for development, experience with commercial real estate, strong operational management, and access to a major freight corridor, Maybe. If you're thinking about borrowing $2 million, buying some cheap land beside a rural highway, putting up 6 diesel pumps, and hoping truckers magically appear, absolutely not. The business isn't really about selling diesel. It isn't really about selling burgers. And it isn't even really about parking trucks. It's about owning the place where a driver has no choice but to stop, and then making every minute of that stop economically valuable. Because that's the hidden economics of the truck stop. A truck driver may only stop for 30 minutes. But if you own the right piece of land, that 30-minute stop can generate fuel revenue, food revenue, retail revenue, parking revenue, service revenue, and eventually millions of dollars in annual sales. The truck stops because the driver has to. The driver spends because you made stopping convenient. And the owner makes money because every minute on that property is monetized. That's the business. You're not selling fuel. You're selling the most valuable thing on the highway, a reason to stop.